Victors. Welcome to this week's Victory Show. If this is the first time you're joining us, I'm Travis Cody, best-selling author, 16 books, and I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of business consultants, founders, and entrepreneurs write and publish their own best-selling books. And along that journey, I've discovered a really fascinating pattern. A lot of businesses hit a revenue plateau, usually $500,000 to $1 million, 5 employees, maybe 10 employees, and they really struggle to break through that. They'll be stuck there for years. So on this show, I sit down with some of the world's most successful CEOs, leaders, business owners, to uncover the strategies they use to overcome those plateaus and scale their businesses to new heights. So if you're looking to learn from the best and get actionable insights that can propel your business forward, you're in the right place. Today, I have the privilege of introducing a guest who is redefining what it means to create luxury experiences for women. Kannyn January is the visionary of Ambiance, a company dedicated to bringing the essence of California luxury to modern women worldwide. With a deep passion for fashion, innovation, and excellence, Kannyn has made it her mission to curate exclusive high-end collections that blend timeless elegance with contemporary style. Her journey in luxury retail has been fueled by a commitment to purposeful leadership and an unwavering focus on delivering extraordinary customer experiences. From brand development to e-commerce growth, Kannyn's expertise has elevated Ambiance into a beacon of sophistication and inspiration for women seeking to express their individuality through fashion. As if running a global luxury brand wasn't enough, Kannyn also now gives back to the next generation of leaders through her Leadership First consulting group. So get ready to be inspired by Kannyn's insights on leadership, innovation, and how she's transforming the standard of luxury retail, one curated collection at a time. Kannyn, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a little bit earlier, and I always bring it up. I lived in Southern California, and you went to Cal Poly Tech. So let's talk about that because it's a pretty prestigious school.
Cal Polytech, San Luis Obispo.
So we got to put the San Luis Obispo. We got to tag that on there. So let's talk about because you're in retail now, but that's not where you thought you were headed when you went to school. So let's talk about what was your vision when you went to school and what were you thinking you were going to do with your life at that point in time?
I have a biochemistry degree. So my plan was to go to medical school. And while I was in college, I ended up getting hired to work at the store I now own. And I moved up from, a stylist to an assistant manager. I ended up being the bookkeeper for the owner, and then I ended up being the manager, and she was pretty removed. So I actually approached her and said, I'd love to take out an SBA loan and buy the business.
Wow. Now, was this when you were still in college?
Yes, I was 23. I still had 2 quarters left at Cal Poly.
Wow. School wasn't keeping you busy enough?
Both my parents are self-employed. And so at the time, I was like, oh, you want to do something, you just figure it out and do it. Looking back, I realized that I made a lot of mistakes, especially in the beginning.
So you did go ahead and do it, just figure it out?
I did. My banker, I remember, and I was applying for the SBA loan, and my banker at the time, he walked into the store because I opened the doors before I actually got funded, maxed out my credit cards to pay for merchandise. And he commended me on how brazen I was to just go for it without all the funding in place.
So what was it about that particular store that made you think, yeah, was it just because you'd kind of started as a stylist and had worked through kind of a lot of the positions in the store already that you felt like you had a pretty good handle on it?
Yeah. And, my plan was to grow it, sell it, and pay for medical school. And, owning it is different than working in a business.
Just a little bit.
And I changed it, I paid for a business, and then I wanted to put my stamp on it, which was a huge mistake because it had an established clientele based on the way the business was. So I think I did like 1/10 of the sales volume that the store was doing my first year open.
So so that was, it's like, did you do a big pivot then? Like, did you change, and what was the change that you made?
I repainted the store and I changed the direction and the way I was buying the brands. And then I think I doubled the next year. And then kind of as you were talking, I had this very slow, painful growth. I think I was at $550,000 at the time. And I hired a retail analyst to help me manage my inventory, cadence, cash flow. And I think the first thing he told me was that I should rent a storage unit and move out. And he was just basically like, this, what you're doing is not working. And I just said, well, yeah, I can't do that. So, you just grind it. grind away.
You
And
bought the
then,
business with the expectation of here's what it's been making year over year for however many years, and then you take over and you lose 90% of that revenue.
yes,
Ouch.
overnight. Yeah.
So this is what I'm excited to talk to you today is most of the business owners I'm talking to, a lot of them are running digital spaces, right? They're consulting or they're digital marketing or online e-commerce. You're in brick and mortar retail, and that is such a different economics and business model and challenges that I think most, and in some ways, I probably look at e-commerce and be like, that's so much easier for those guys. So let's talk about some of the challenges. So you were saying like with your business, you've got to move your inventory every 90 days. And is that because of
Yes.
basically the season? So every 90 days there's a new season?
The seasonality, that time has really changed over the last 20 years because major retailers have become way more aggressive with how quickly they want to turn product. I have, a handful of vendors that based on how they ship and the seasonality of their product, it may not be quite that 90-day period, but yes.
So all right. So you were into it a couple of years before you hired the analyst?
I hired one analyst probably within the first year. I switched analysts in 2000. I think I fired my analyst in 2007 and then hired another analyst in 2008. And that's when I actually doubled the business.
So let's so for people that are not familiar with especially the luxury retail space and clothing and that sort of thing, like what does an analyst do?
So the analyst that I had worked with, and I'm actually a retail expert as well. So I do this for other companies. We break down every department in your business and determine what the correct inventory is for you to hit projected sales numbers. You may need 3 t-shirts to sell 1 t-shirt, and you can have too little inventory and you can have too much inventory. It's the company that I work with. They have really advanced algorithms and AI that help determine the amount of denim you need to carry in your store in March. And that's going to look different in April, and that's going to look different in December.
That is so bizarre to me, like not knowing anything about your space. I'm like, what? That sounds so complicated.
It is. I love numbers, looking like I would have loved being an accountant. I always feel like numbers are my superpower. I don't know that my team appreciates that as much as I do, but.
Well, Schwarzenegger always said that was one of the reasons why he was so good at real estate is that he just naturally could look at the numbers for it all and it all made sense to him really quickly. So that is definitely a superpower. So your first couple of years, you were really just kind of limping along and hanging on by the skin of your teeth. And so it was year 4 that you hired a new analyst and that doubled the business.
Yeah. Well, we were going through the real estate recession at that time. And I had fired everybody in the business for various reasons. I had a son at that point. I had a 4-year-old son or I had a 1-year-old son. Gosh, 2008. Yeah, he was a year and a half. And I was like, well, if I can't take home a paycheck, then I'm not going to pay anyone else. That doesn't make sense. So it was very freeing to let everybody go. And I said, the next person I hire, she's going to be amazing. And me and her together doubled the business during, economic downturn.
Wow. When you did that, then like after a few years of like, oh my God, what I got myself into, was that pretty freeing? You're like, okay, yes, I just doubled my business. And did you continue that sort of growth for a couple of years?
Yes. And then I started opening more locations. But when I hired the new analyst, I remember he sat me down and he said, how would you like to work 20 hours a week and make, over 6 figures? And I hadn't made anywhere near that.
You were like, what is this magical world you're speaking of?
Yes, sign me up. And it was almost just the idea that it was possible that changed my whole outlook, because I still had this idea that I am going to go to med school and that's the future that's going to provide, a wonderful life for my family. And him, the idea that it was possible totally reframed how I was making decisions in the business.
Yeah, I could see that. Making six figures, you're making a doctor's salary, and you're doing that on 20 hours a week. That's a good aspiration to have. So how did that change your decision making then? What was it about that specifically that you want, oh, I need to do things differently?
I really started to drill down to like what it meant to be financially sound in every aspect of my business, whether it's, marketing, staffing. For retailers, it's really merchandise and staff, especially brick and mortar retailers. Those are your two biggest costs. But at the time, it's crazy how in any business you can get very loose with how and what you're spending your money on, and how when you take the time to really dig in, to your P&L and go, how much did I spend on travel last year? How much, you're like, okay, I can do this differently, and doing it differently, it really impacts your financial freedom for the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think most people, again, I shouldn't say most people, in my experience, a lot of the smaller businesses, and I say smaller businesses doing under $1 million a year, they're almost kind of scared to look at their numbers, or they're intimidated by them. They're like, nah, my cash flows cover my bills. I don't need to worry about it. But in the meantime, the debt's going up because they're not tracking it. So
right. Well, and they don't know that it's okay to say no, or they don't know I think for a lot of us, our business become an extension of ourselves, and we build relationships and make decisions, and sometimes the decisions are the right decisions and sometimes they're not the right decisions, and then having to kind of face that decision and change it. And I can give you an example. One of the people I've coached, she was spending, I can't remember how much a month, but she was spending a ton of money in marketing, and way more money than her business could afford. And I think when I asked her, she said, oh, well, I'm getting these photo shoots done and I'm friends with a photographer. And I said, hey, the bottom line is you can't afford it. And you're coming to me and you're wanting to figure out how to get out of debt. And, we have to take a look at. And that was an uncomfortable conversation for her to have with me, let alone then go back to her friend and say, hey, I can't afford this. But at the end of the day, you have to protect your interests in your business. You'd rather have a business and not be doing photo shoots monthly, right? Than go out of business because it was an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. So at what point then, like how many years into this then did you start thinking about expanding?
Actually, somebody brought the opportunity to me. I hadn't thought about expanding. When she did, I realized, because the stores are 30 minutes apart, just you're so centrally located, I'm not doubling my expenses. That was the biggest light bulb for me. Like, I can open up this store and I'm not doubling everything, right? Because I have a built-in back of house, I have a buyer already, I have pieces of the business that I'm doing already that are costing me X amount of money. And even if those costs increase, they're not doubling. So the ability to be profitable with 2 locations as a retailer goes up exponentially. I did have 4 locations though, and sometimes more is not more.
So how quickly of a time frame did you go from 1 to 4? Was that over like a few years, or did you do that pretty quickly?
I think it was like 5 years, 5 or 6 years.
So pretty much there for a while, about every 12 months or so, you were opening a new location.
Yeah. I mean, I think the 4th one I opened knowing I was going to close the 3rd one I had opened. The distance between the stores obviously grew, and staffing honestly was the hardest part for me in having stores that are 5 hours away from where I live.
Wow. That's the 4th one was 5 hours away.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, no, the 3rd one, and then the 4th one was about 2.5 hours away.
Wow. So it's really interesting what you were saying there. We had somebody on a few episodes ago, and he was running he had 6 companies. He had a contracting and a cement company and a bunch of other things. And he was saying that when I was asking him about that, he said one of the things that allowed them to do that was that they essentially created their own internal like accounting firm that handled the accounting for all 5 businesses. So each business didn't have to pay its own thing. It was all just one expense. And so the success of one business was covering accounting and bookkeeping, and a lot of the, 1K and HR for all the other four. So those four were actually able to be a lot more profitable because of that. So I think you sort of inadvertently discovered that. Now you were saying earlier you opened number four, and so did you get to a point where you had pretty much a system of like, here's how we open a store, get it launched, get foot traffic coming in the door? Did that kind of turn into a process at that point in time?
I actually had not discovered EOS at the that would have made opening the stores a lot easier. The fourth location, I actually was a already existing store. And so I actually just assumed the lease and purchased the fixtures and rebranded. Yeah. So that was the easiest one to open. I actually felt like, again, I learned as I was opening kind of ideal pieces that would change the investment and the time that it would take to get open. And the third store actually was a huge investment. Like, I mean, I feel like I learned a lot the hard way many times over.
What was it made the third one that made it such a bigger investment than the other three?
We built it out from scratch, and we ended up, it was a really old building. There was water damage. We ended up having to replace some plumbing, and and then it just extended our opening date. We had product arriving, but that store, my fourth store was in Montecito, and they were like very similar demographics. Or if they do, they're working for Google, right?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. And then of course, shortly after that, COVID, there was a bit of a pivot.
Yes.
So what were the challenges you had as a retail during that whole scenario, and how long were you forced to kind of have everything closed down?
Well, I'm in California, so we were forced to be closed for a good chunk of time, open, close. And because I was brick and mortar, we had unique challenges. That was the moment I realized I should have been focusing on my online. We had a website, but we weren't taking it very seriously. And then we got very serious. And my goal was to keep all of my full-time people employed. So all of us learned how to navigate Shopify, e-commerce real quick. So and then my husband, like, we did a lot through social media. We had a very strong social media presence. And so we did a lot of home deliveries.
Wow.
And we supported a lot of local businesses by interviewing owners and getting them on our social media, like featuring, I think we had like a restaurant day, and we just were trying to help everybody because, as a business owner, it was a hard time for all of us.
Yep, for everybody, for sure. And how did you do revenue wise then, pivoting to the online? Were you enough to like essentially keep things afloat, or were you able to did you quintuple your online revenue from that, and did that launch kind of a new phase of the company at that point?
We grew online, but that first part of the year was pretty scary. I mean, my banker said I was the first person to get my paperwork in for PPP. I had been doing research to kind of see how the government was going to come in and support us. And I was like submitting paperwork I found from other banks, trying to make sure that we got the money, and really just to pay my staff. It's because even getting rid of part-time people, it was all my, my leadership team, my managers. And so it was still a considerable amount of money that we were out every couple of weeks.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you survived, thankfully, but you've scaled back. So you were at 4, you knew you were shutting down 3, but now you're back down to 2 stores.
I have 2 stores, and then I have the e-commerce, and, I did realize that more is not more. And I actually, letting go of the 3rd store, I became more profitable. And then I let go of that 4th store because of COVID. But I took the energy and the time and the effort I was spending, training and buying for those additional locations. And I built more of our own proprietary product. So, I have, like I said, a fine jewelry line, a handbag line. We have clothing, and then accessories and candles that have all launched within the last, 6 months to a year.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty big pivot. And so revenue wise then, like these last few years, like have these been some of the best years you've had out of the
Yes. I mean, I think a lot of retailers would say, 2021 was a great year for retail because everybody had so much money saved from
Pent up
really
energy to get outside and
spending
do
money.
stuff.
Except they were ready to go shopping. They
Yeah.
wanted new clothes. They wanted out of their sweatpants. Yeah.
So what are
2021 was good.
okay? And so you were sharing earlier that one of the big things that's made a difference this last little year is you discovered EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. So how did you find that? Were you looking for something specific for your management and running the business, and what was it about that particular philosophy
Yeah,
that appealed to you?
I actually had taken my leadership team to Disney Institute 2 or 3 day retreat right before COVID. It was the February of 2020. So, and I had sent my team away to and I had gone to different retail management or sales training seminars. I've been doing that for a long time. So I love personal and professional development. I think I'm always reading 4 or 5 books at a time. And I have hard copies of paperbacks. And then I have my books on my phone that I'm listening to. And I actually think the first book I read was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Have you read that one?
I haven't read that one yet, but I'm familiar with it.
And then
So that one you're reading through it and you were like, oh, I recognize that.
like, oh,
That one.
yes, it's a really short read. I think of the book on tape's like 3.5 hours long. And it just made so much sense. So then I got Get a Grip and Rocket Fuel and Traction and then I decided to hire an implementer. The rest is history. It's been
Traction
great.
is
It's
the
been
one
great
that
for our
really
company.
Traction really made the biggest difference for me in my business and helped me see just the way I was looking. It made a lot of sense because of the fact I'm a visionary. So I was like, that makes so much sense. So I have like 30 half finished projects.
Yeah, I'm also a visionary, although I'm a visionary who has also a high integrator. Like I couldn't do either, which according to our implementer, isn't as common.
Yeah,
But I
it's a
think
rare thing.
it's allowed me to be able to kind of do so many roles in the business. And
Wow. So along this process, and obviously this is growing, you launched your Leadership First Consulting Group. Let's talk about what is that and how are you now taking all of this hard won wisdom and experience over 2 decades. How are you now using that in your consulting group?
So I'm a retail analyst, which is something that I offer as part of coaching. But really, where I feel like I'm able to make the biggest difference is just being able to have one-on-one conversations with retailers like myself who maybe are stuck, like you had mentioned, in their journey and not able to see how they could do it differently. I believe that leadership isn't something that we focus enough on as we're raising our kids or, going to college. It's not something that it's not something you're forced to take, right? We're all forced to take these specific classes. But nobody really, unless, my dad was really into Jim Rohn. So he probably planted the seed for me.
Yeah.
I remember him listening to
Jim Rohn.
Jim Rohn, those books on tape. We'd be like in his van and he'd have, the huge
motivational stuff.
cassette. Yes, totally. We talk a lot about managing, which I have found in my business is not necessarily going to yield to the results that we're all looking for. And I have found that, leading first and really leaning into leadership as a group of people that are running a company, you can have more.
Well, nobody likes to be managed either, but we do like to be led. If somebody's got a vision and they're clear and excites us, like we love to follow that person, but somebody coming and trying to manhandle you or, micromanage.
I think as business owners, we often get stuck, managing or micromanaging because we start so small, right? So we know how to do everything really well. And then we start to bring in people and we teach them. But I think a very common mistake that we all make is I can do that the way I want it done. So I want to do it, or I can do it faster, or I can do it better because I've been doing it for longer. And one of the great things about, EOS is really understanding that when you have the right people in the right roles, and even if they're, maybe they're not doing it to the same degree that you're doing, having them do it good or having them do it well frees up your energy and time to take on different aspects of the business that either aren't getting addressed or need to get addressed so that you can grow.
We just maybe 3 or 4 interviews ago was speaking with someone named Parul, and she's an executive advisor, and she was saying that's one of the biggest things with CEOs when they get to a certain point is learning the thing that holds them back the most is learning how to let go. And that, to that point, because they're like, but I can do this better, or I can do this faster, I can do whatever. And so we had the conversation about in certain aspects of your business, you have to get comfortable getting things to good enough if it frees that time from you to be able to go do the bigger picture stuff. So I think that's a really big lesson. And frankly, 90% of people, that's probably going to be one of their biggest challenges is because we always, especially if it's something we're good at, we're always going to be able to do it better. Right? So being able to
something that you love doing.
Sure.
Sometimes it's like, I just love doing this thing in my business. I love helping women. Honestly, it's why I fell in love with retail. It fills my bucket having that interaction where you're solving a problem and they walk out feeling excited and sometimes better than they felt walking in. But there's that idea, what got you here won't get you there, right? So if you're interested in growing and you're interested in growth in your business or for you personally, the person that manages $1 million business isn't the same person that can successfully manage a $5 million business or a $10 million business and so on and so forth. Our facilitator, she said that at one point she had to take a look at her business because she sold it. And they said, are you capable? You've been a CEO of this business this whole time. Are you capable of running it at this level? And it was a very hard look in the mirror to determine whether or not she was the right person to continue to grow her business or keep her business from, not imploding. Because I don't care how big you are, if something's not managed well, I don't know what the average life of a business is, but even the big guys, they go down.
Sure. Kodak was around for 100 years and then they weren't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great statement. It was one of my mentors in my early career. He runs a very successful business, in 8 figures. And he was telling me about a time when he got invited to Necker Island with a bunch of entrepreneurs and we're having dinner and he happened to be sitting next to Richard Branson. And so during dinner, he asked him, and he said, "Hey, I'm running an 8-figure business and, I want to become a billionaire. So what do I have to do to go from 8-figure business to eventually having a business worth $1 billion?" And he said, Richard Branson just looked at him and he said, "You have to get rid of all of your bad millionaire habits because that's what's preventing you from becoming a billionaire." And he said he didn't hear anything the whole rest of the dinner. He just sat there going like, what millionaire? But because all these things that he was being lauded for, like, "Oh my God, you do this and this and this." And Richard Branson's like, "That's all the stuff that's going to prevent you from getting to the next level." So I just thought that was very insightful. And it's like you were saying, right? When you're running a business that's $500,000 a year and you get to $1 million, there's different challenges and there's different thing. And now to go from there to, as you said, to get to 5 million, and now there's a whole other level that you weren't even aware existed. So unless you're doing personal development and willing to either upscale your thing or also recognize I'm not the right person for this and I need to step back and let somebody else do it, then you can get stuck. So you've had a fantastic.
So I said, think being humble enough to learn from people that are smarter than you, or learn from people who've done it already. Like if you have, and I think people always think that it's about the money, but I do think it's about looking at your mentors and not just the amount of money they make, but look at their lifestyle. Is that a lifestyle that I want? Because I have been involved in the professional development, I've met a lot of coaches, right? And I'm not someone who would want to travel and speak all over the world because I really value my time. I value, if I'm going to travel, it's going to be with my family. And people look at, very successful people in that field and think, wow, look at how much money they make. But you also just want to make sure, again, that you want to live the life that they're living.
Yeah. I a few years ago, I was doing some consulting with the company, and the owner was, I think they were probably going to do 40 million that year, but he was so stressed out from the business of the way it was structured. I think that year he spent almost 4 months in the hospital from like stress related stuff. And at the same time, I have a good friend. He has a little e-commerce. I say it's a little e-commerce. It makes about $1 million a year. And I remember having this conversation with him one time, and he was making the comment that I worked too much. And I was like, well, I do this and this and this. And his response was it was a good metaphorical slap in the face, because he said, dude, if I'm working more than an hour a day, something's broken in my business. And I was so shocked, because I was just coming off of working with this guy doing, 40 million a year. And here he was, and this guy was just like, no, man, if it takes me more than an hour, like some sort of, because he systematized everything. So he was like, if the systems are broken. And and to the point, right? And we were having conversations about business growth. And I was like, well, you could do this and triple your revenue and do this and quadruple it. And he's like, yeah, but if we do that, then I got to go do this thing, and I don't like doing that. And I could do that, but then I've got to manage, and I don't like managing people. And he finally just said, I spend 7 days a week riding my mountain bike and skiing in Colorado. He's like, what is a $3 million a year business going to get me that my $1 million a year business isn't already providing?
Doesn't get, yeah.
And for me, that was the lesson I learned from that was, I had come from this online arena where the guys that are successful they're always like, there's always more online. You can always make more money. So they launch something and it makes $10 million. And the next time around, they're like, well, it's got to make 12 million or I'm a failure. And it was always like, and this is the first person I met who got to a point was all, oh, this is enough. I don't need more than this. Let me just, if I can get here and just stay where I'm at with this lifestyle, that's enough. It was shocking for me. And have a capitalist person going, and this is enough. We're good here. So
there's a story that's similar where, some CEO sees a fisherman and, sees him bring in this huge catch, and he goes, I could help you scale this business. That guy's like, okay, well, what does that look like? And he's like, well, we'd get some investors and we'd get you more boats. And he's like, okay, well, then what? And he goes, well, we could make it big enough where you're able to, make enough money where you don't have to work. And he goes, well, as it is now, like I'm done fishing now, it's early in the day and I get to go home and spend time with my family and play the guitar. And he says, all this work that you're going to have me do is going to give me that same outcome. But what are the next, 5, 10, 15 years look like to get me to where I am right now?
Yeah. Jim Carrey a while back said something I thought was really interesting, because in the Hollywood space, it seems like everybody's got an alcohol line and a perfume line and a clothing line. And it's not like, once they get to a certain point, they just start piling all these businesses. And Jim Carrey was like, yeah, I just got to this point where I realized, I am enough. He's like, I don't need to have a social media presence. I don't need to have an alcohol line. I don't need to have my car line. I don't need to have the whatever. He's like, who I am is just enough. Why do I need more? And it was kind of funny, because at the time it kind of came across as like a spit in the face to Hollywood, because everybody was so like, I'm the brand and I'm got to do all these sort of things. And Jim Carrey's like, well, why? Why do we need to do that? Why can't you just do what you're doing and have a good life? So, well, you've had a fantastic run of 20 years. I mean, it's definitely been a roller coaster. Where do you envision this next phase of your life going with Ambiance and your leadership consulting? Like, where's your vision taking you from here?
Well, growth. I am growth oriented, so I wouldn't be happy any other way. My plan is to build it up enough to sell it. Brick and mortar is definitely a harder arena to sell your business in, but that would be my ultimate goal. And I love, just like I like helping women, I love helping other business owners, having more time to do that, and then just more time to spend with my family. I have my kids are growing up. I have one that's going to go to college next year, and I want to be able to travel and visit and just not be a slave to my business. I'm very blessed. I recognize that. I have an amazing business and an amazing team, probably the best team I've ever had. And yet sometimes it's hard to keep things balanced, not work too much.
Sure. Yeah, there's always something else that can be done. So final thoughts then on somebody who's in the retail space, has their own business, they hear this. What are a couple of pieces of advice you'd give to somebody who's playing the retail game right now?
I would say that, make decisions based on what your customer would want, not what you would want. That, anytime you buy any business, especially retail business, you're buying yourself a job. So make sure you really want to do that job every day. To, believe in yourself. I think that's another simple thing that we don't instill in our kids or really teach in school. You have to believe it to achieve it. So, and if you don't, what is it? The saying, it's if you don't plan something about failure. I just said it to my colleague today. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, have a plan. Hope is not a plan. I say that to my team all the time. And Yoda says, do or do not, there is no try. I cannot tell you how many times today I'm going to try to do that. I said, are you? Or you just do it.
So for people listening, if they want to support what you're doing, how do they get involved with what you're doing? How do they find you? So where do they go if they want to shop on?
It's www.shopambiance.com. And you can follow us on social at Shop Ambiance. It's my first name, Kannyn, Kannyn at shopambiance.com. I will have a website in the next 6 months for my Leadership First Consulting business, and it's leadershipfirstconsulting.com. So, and then I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome. It's always a good place. Kannyn, thank you so much for the time today. This has been fascinating. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Good luck in the future. And
thank you. You as well.